and welcome to another tip of the day. I'm Lou Collins, and today we're going to be talking about ink blending. Now, you don't have to use distress inks, but usually a water-based ink will absolutely blend much easier than a solvent-based ink. They do dry a lot slower, so it allows you to do that blending. I love distress inks for this, but there are many on the market. I also really like at the moment distress oxides as well. They are extremely creamy and they do blend together beautifully too, so it's well worth checking those out. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is you don't have to have a different applicator for every colour, but it is helpful, although I have a variation. So I do have one for each colour, and I use brush blenders. Some people love to use foam blenders, and that's absolutely fine. You can do that, but I do find with the brushes you get a smoother application, and you do find that with that you do get less lines in it. So there's 3 of my applicators. Now I keep these just for the colours, but then I have my mixing one. So this is one that I will wash and clean quite often, and this is just to go over the blending lines and mix them in without contaminating your brushes. Okay, so let's get started. Now I've got a piece of cardstock, and this is a smooth cardstock. It's bright white, so it will show the colours nice and vividly. By using smooth, the colour will be able to move around better. If you have a textured cardstock or something like watercolour cardstock, the ink will simply soak in really quickly and it will be much harder to move it about smoothly. When you're choosing your colours, think about the rainbow. So it's much easier to go from pink into purple because there is some red in purple, and then from purple into blue because again there's some blue in purple. These are in the order that they would be in the rainbow. Okay, so if you try to do it another way, so if I was to try and go from pink into blue, these two would mix to make purple. So I'd sort of have a purple into a pink and then a purple again into a blue. They wouldn't mix quite as easily. You'd get that middle colour there. So think about the rainbow is my top tip for when you're choosing your colours and which order they're going to go in. You can mix any colours you like. Have a think about how primary colours mix to make a secondary colour. So if you do have a red and a green together, bear in mind they are going to turn into brown. We call this going muddy for obvious reasons. If you do have 2 colours like that, it's well worth thinking about putting a colour in between that will work. Say for example a yellow, so a green can work nicely into a yellow, and then a yellow can go nicely into a red, and you'll have like an orangey and a limey tone in between those. So break those colours down if you can. Right, let's get started. So I've got a piece of paper here that is much larger than I need. I know what size panel I need, so I'm going to use the area at the sides here to hold my paper still while I do my blending in the middle. Then I can trim that down afterwards. So I'm going to start with my first colour, and I'm going to put lots of ink. It's well worth having more ink than you think you need on here. And I'm going to start at the very bottom with a solid pink, building that up until I can't see any white through it. Like I say, I'm working with a brush, but I'm working in small circles. And as you can see, where I lighten the pressure, I get a much paler application. We're going to use this in a moment. I'm going to come up about almost halfway, not quite halfway. I'm not going to get picky with fractions, but a little more than a third, because you want each third colour to overlap into each other. Once you get to the third of solid colour, you want to start lightening up the pressure with this pink a little bit, and we will go in and we'll tweak how much colour is down. So coming up to nearly a half, but I am blending that colour out by just now using what's on the brush. This is where it's important to be using just one colour. I'm just going to fill down here as well, and make sure you fill in the bottom so that's nice and solid. Now I'm going to turn this round. I'm going to go to my next colour. Put the cap on mine just so that I can keep them clean, and I'm going to load this up with purple. Now my solid purple is going to run through the middle. I'm going to go straight in with that. The great thing is you can keep overlaying these, you can keep adding to them. Depending on your cardstock, these may dry reasonably quickly or they may stay damp for quite a long time. I can't tell you which cardstock will do which, because of course there are so many on the market. So what I'm now going to do is from that solid purple, I'm going to now start lightening the pressure out this way into the pink. So we're overlapping the pink and the purple, always using small circles. That's all you need to do, just work slowly, work in small circles, and you can keep working over and over until you are happy. There we go. So I've just taken my purple over into there. So we've got a nice blend there already. I'm feeling like I need a little more ink in the middle here. So I'm going to start in the solid purple and blend it upwards so I don't put too much in straight away. There we go. And then I'm going to turn this over, still just holding my edges. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to blend this from the solid colour, moving upwards in little circles and lightening that pressure as we work. This is definitely one for using with your newer ink pads. You'll find this really difficult and very time consuming if you've got older ink pads that are not so juicy anymore. So definitely want to be using your newer ones for this. There we go. So now up here I'm going to start lightening the pressure and fading out to a very pale purple. Okay, so now we need to come down and we're going to use the turquoise colour. Turquoise applicator, so it's dedicated to this colour. Different variants of this colour, but always aqua. And I'm going to do just like the pink. I'm going to start with solid colour down the bottom. You may notice underneath I do have a covering. This is a resistant covering. This just means when I go over the edge, I can drag that colour back up onto my paper without wasting it, but also I'm protecting my mat underneath. Or you may be working at a craft desk or something. Particularly you, those of you who have white craft desks, you absolutely want to be covering those over before you're doing this. Now I'm going up with quite deep colour into the purple, so I'll see a nice colour change between the turquoise and the purple, and again coming up as you get almost to halfway, we're just going to really have that colour lightened up, very, very pale, just touching the purple there. There we go. So we've got a nice blend from one to the other. The last stage for me now is just to take my clean blender, and I do like to go in and give it an all over blend like so, just to smooth out any pieces that are still wet, make sure everything's blended in nicely. This is completely optional, this stage, but I do like to do it. Now I am going to do one last thing, and this is a preference. If you want a nice smooth blend on your project, you can leave it like this. But if you want to maybe hide any discrepancies that you're struggling to cover up, this is the way to go. A little bit of water if you've used a water-based ink. So all I do now is I spritz a little bit of water into my hand and I just flick it onto the ink. And I give that a few seconds to settle. Now what this is going to do is lift up some areas of ink. It's going to lighten them. It almost bleaches them, as you can see it working there as we're talking. And what I'll do is either heat set that after 30 seconds to a minute, or take a towel or something, this is an old one, and just lift off that moisture, and that will lift off any excess ink as well. There we go. That will continue to dry a little bit lighter as well, which is why heat setting does finish it off perfectly. Now, just so you can see the finished effect, I'm just going to trim down the edges and then we'll come back and have a look at this properly. There, so I've trimmed off those edges, which are a little distracting because you can't seem to see past the rough edges, but now that's all nice and clear and a solid panel of colour, you can see how beautiful that blend is, and that's how easy it is to do ink blending with water-based inks.